to two companies.
Whoop.
Or maybe you can find a place that wants municipal internet and then use tax money to pay for it.
I feel like the problem is any place that wants municipal internet probably... Well, any place that doesn't have municipal internet that's also rural that fits what we're talking about, the people there are probably dumb and red statey and would definitely not want a municipal ISP.
I'm talking about a place that already wants municipal internet. They actively want internet.
But that's the places that actively want internet and want municipal ISPs and have enough people and government will and everything probably already have internet.
We could do the same. It's basically do the same thing that like baseball stadiums do. You make the tax money pay for the stadium, but then you sell all the tickets and you take all the money privately.
I feel like those places don't generate enough tax revenue.
We can find a place that will use its tax revenue. Or even if it's a town, it could steal money from the state coffers to pay for internet.
We already got someone watching.
Go home.
Go home, Odysseus. Props to what's his name who fucking just fell out of the ceiling and died in Cersei's house.
Oh.
I love that guy because I like how he comes back and you like talk to him. Okay.
Props to Agamemnon.
I like how Hercules shows up and he's just like, yeah, I'm fucking Hercules. Everyone else is dead and stupid, but I'm just still cool. What's up?
And everyone's like, well, I guess you're right.
Yeah.
Even Achilles ain't gonna fuck with you.
Yeah, he comes out of hell and he's got his bow out. He's just like, I'll fight you. Even though Odysseus was a little bit like, whoa, okay. It's Thursday, July 19th, 2018. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight in the GeekNights Book Club, we're talking about Emily Wilson's translation of Homer's The Odyssey.
Not a Odyssey.
The.
The.
Oh, there's like 5 people watching. I guess people were waiting for this.
No, go away, people. Find something better to do.
Let's do the opening bit, but no news, because
I don't have any news anyway.
I got tons of news. Just,
I don't have it.
All right.
What was my thing of the day again?
Your thing of the day was...
Oh, right.
That thing.
Yeah.
And mine is Tom Dempsey.
I knew about Tom Dempsey already.
What did you know about him? Do you know about his foot?
Yeah.
You know about the rule they passed?
Yeah, the thing is you have to wear an actual shoe, right?
It was more than that. You can't even fill if you're missing part of your foot, you can't even like fill the shoe with anything that isn't like very foot-like. The rules are very specific. And the rules were written specifically because of him.
Mm-hmm. Well, now people kick like a soccer ball and not like with the front of their foot anymore. So.
Yep. And I saw something in college. There's some people in college who still do the front on kick.
Yeah,
and they're okay.
Because they're not. They don't know better, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, someone could be good at it, but...
NFL kickers are so good at it.
Yep.
They keep hitting it from farther and farther away with more and more reliability, even now, every year. So they have to, they're like, they want to push back the extra point and stuff,
Yep.
I think they actually did. I stopped paying attention because murder ball.
Yeah.
And Giants suck anyway.
Yep. All right. Let's see. So, yeah, no news because... It's the Geek Nights Book Club. I guess what I should point out is that if you're new to Geek Nights, we have a book club, and we've been doing this for a long time. So,
even though it takes a long-ass time for us to read a book, it doesn't actually take a long time to read the book. It just, we don't spend enough time reading.
Yep, partly because we had a lot going on.
It probably only took me, like, maybe less than 10 hours to read this book in total.
Yep.
But it just, those 10 hours are spread out over many, many months. At least 6, maybe.
But anyway, the deal, we're going to get right into it. We're going to have things today, but we're going to get right into this book club, is that we're assuming you read the book. Meaning we're not going to explain the plot to you, and we're going to casually spoil everything. Mm-hmm. Granted, I don't
feel like you can spoil the Odyssey.
Yeah, guess what? He makes it home. I mean...
If you don't know the story of the Odyssey, even if you never read the Odyssey, I knew the story of it, the general story, before even reading the pop-up book.
Yeah, well, partly because the word Odyssey...
I learned the story of the Odyssey from other things that I watched in my or read
Yep.
in my childhood.
And then I didn't read the Odyssey until
For
my
example,
freshman year
there
of
was
high
like
school.
there was a multi-part DuckTales episode I had on VHS.
Yeah.
That was the Odyssey. There was what else was the Odyssey? That's the one I remember the most. But there was, I think I read, there was like a children's video, one of those like storybooks that you see at the library that hardly moves.
You've got that awesome pop-up book that you got at Mocha a long time ago of the Odyssey.
Well, that's,
I mean, that was more recent. I didn't actually read the Odyssey, like for real, until 9th grade, because in my high school, 9th grade was the year you did Greek literature. So you did the Odyssey and all the tragedies and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't actually read all of the Odyssey, and I wasn't really realized that till I read the Odyssey again later.
There was only mythology in our school if you elected mythology in high school, and I think then they made you read a whole bunch of mythologies.
No,
But
mythology-
I did not elect that. I elected science fiction and also hippie anti-war book.
Now,
and-
mythology was its own thing, but the Odyssey and Greek literature was not opt-outable. That was core, like,
Yeah.
even the dumb side of the school, like the regular basic class English, it was still Greek stuff.
Basically, there were 3 literature electives for snooty smart kids, and I chose none of them, which was Shakespeare, mythology,
Yeah.
and Mark Twain type action. And I chose none of those 3. I chose all the other ones.
At RIT, I just tested out of everything except the one class I couldn't test out of,
Yeah.
where I had to read all those terrible books, Tree of Red Stars.
Yep.
We will never do a book club book on the Tree of Red Stars, I promise you.
Why would we?
Guess we could warn people against it.
Anyway.
3 stars, run away.
So the point is that, we know the Odyssey, but this is a new translation of the Odyssey. And I've never read any other translation of the Odyssey that wasn't some simplified children's or pop-up book. I've never read, I've read some other mythologies.
I've mostly read in high school one translation. I don't know which one. It was just in our textbook.
Mm-hmm.
And I fully read a different translation. I'm pretty sure it was a Penguin book, but I don't know anything about it. We're not
There's a
talking
lot
about
of them.
that.
There's like 4 different ones on Amazon, and you don't know which one's good.
But I'd never read a modern or modernized translation until this.
Mm-hmm.
But again, really, we're going to assume you read the book. You can continue to listen to this episode if you didn't read the Odyssey, but that's like when you're at a convention or at a party and you're hanging out on the outside of a circle of people talking about something and you have no idea what they're talking about and you're just standing there kind of nodding along. You really don't want to be that guy.
Rim is that guy.
No, I usually know what's going on.
All right. The other thing is, to talk about this book, right, is kind of hard because I feel like the introduction and also the notes at the end sort of say everything there is that I could possibly say, and I don't have any special knowledge about, Greek history, literature, Homer, anything. So it's like, what can I say other than reiterate what was already in there, right? It's like there's people who study this for a fucking living. What do I have to contribute?
Well, that's why rather than talk about the foreword, which if you read this book and didn't read the foreword, the foreword is
what you're paying for.
the foreword taught me a lot about the Odyssey.
Oh yeah.
And it also reinforces something that a lot of people don't seem to realize, that when people say Greek, they always think like Athens and Sparta. That is way, way late Greece.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of Greek and quote-unquote Greek history before that.
Yeah, Homer comes way before, say, Euclid,
Yeah.
right?
Homer comes way before Athens and Sparta as you would know them.
Yeah, I mean, they still, like, Sparta, they mentioned Sparta in the book, right? It existed.
Yeah, but
it's not, the Sparta of 300 was far, far away.
And arguably they might not even be the same thing.
Yep, they could just have the same name. Who
Because, there was the Dorian invasion, which may or may not have been an actual invasion.
In Homer, they're talking about Mycenae like it's a present thing. Mycenae is like the ancient Greek civilization that was lost and we don't know enough about.
Yep. You want to go down a
But that was present to Homer's writings.
You want to go down a rabbit hole? Go read about the Greek Dark Age, because I realize increasingly.
It's like, what BC number are we talking about here with when Homer was supposedly possibly writing the Odyssey?
Like, we're talking like literal if the Trojan War happened, like that era.
If
this
it
is
happened.
so imagine on a super rough scale, because I don't know that much about
I'll just
this.
go to Wikipedia and see.
The Greece that you think of, like Sparta, Athens, Marathon, and after that is Alexander, like on a really broad stroke.
The great one.
So before the Athens Sparta stuff,
and
you
not,
know.
and not Wayne the Great One.
Yep, is the effectively the Greek Dark Age, like archaic Greece, the Dark Age, and then before that is the Homer era. But yeah, we're not going to try to give you a history
in
lesson.
ancient Greek chronology, the sack of Troy was dated to 1184 BC.
That's a long time before the Battle of Marathon.
That's like less than half the distance between us and Jesus who didn't exist.
I mean, here, the Battle of Marathon,
On the other side.
The Battle of Marathon, which is what that era is what most people think of when they think of ancient Greece. Though actually, I think most people think of like classical Greece, like Roman Greece, but anyway, or like all those like way later eras was 490 BC. So the stuff you think about from 490 BC is not the same
like
as what we're talking about here.
700 years. So it's as old. It's basically the distance between us and the medieval times is the distance between Homer and the Greece you're normally thinking about.
But before we get into that, we do have things of the
I think
day.
you just forgot to do things of the day,
No.
and you started book clubbing.
No, I was doing a pre-moment about the book club because we haven't done one in a while, and I want to remind people that we have a book club, and you should just go look at the old episodes, and if a book looks good, read it, and then listen to our show about it.
Yeah, you should read books if you want to be an intelligent person. If you come up to me and say I am a person who does not read books that consist only of words, it doesn't matter if they're or paper. Audiobooks don't count for me at least, but if you're a person who does not read books, my respect for you is diminished. You are below other humans on the respectometer compared to humans who do read.
So, my thing of the day is this video. SB Nation does pretty good videos about like sports history and sports facts. It's fun stuff. And this one is about Tom Dempsey, who, if you don't know, held the record for the longest field goal in football history for 43 years.
Until people knew how to kick.
Well, it wasn't just until people knew how to kick. Stuff changed. Technology changed. There's a lot of things that changed. Also, steroids, more of a thing. Like, there's lots of things
I don't
that
think
changed.
kickers are on steroids.
I wouldn't be surprised.
They don't usually. The kickers are usually the tiniest people on the
With
football
one
field.
big, like, Trogdor-looking leg.
Yeah, maybe.
But anyway, the deal with Tom Dempsey was that he was so good that they made a rule to basically prevent anyone else from ever kicking like him. And the reason he kicked the way he did is because he was literally missing half of his foot, and his foot was basically a club that he used to great effect with terrifying power. And the NFL literally made a rule that specifically prevented anyone from ever doing what he did ever again. And it's just a pretty interesting story. So what do you got?
So this would have been a Monday thing of the day, but whatever. I don't even know if this is real because I didn't try it for myself. This could be like a scam website that's like fooling you into thinking this is real.
That'd be really funny if it is.
But yeah, so one thing people in the web who work in the web always talk about is links. L-Y-N-X. There's also another one, L-I-N-K-S.
Usually in the context of, you made a modern website, but will it work on links?
Right, so
look at how long my neck beard is.
Links is a web browser that runs in the terminal and is like only text. So it's sort of like if you make your website good and accessible enough and adaptable enough, someone should be able to use your website fully from links in the terminal with text only. And it's sort of like a litmus test, but sort of a bullshit one.
Yeah.
Like,
I'd say it was a legitimate litmus test until about 2002.
Yeah, it had its day, but it's like there's no one using links. Maybe there's one guy. The point is, it's a way to browse the web from the terminal, and it works. Even today, it works.
Yep.
But in some web pages, it works better than others. And what someone here did is they made a thing. What's it called?
It is called
Browse. I guess it stands for browser shell or shell browser. And it's basically a web browser that runs in the terminal, but it takes advantage of all the features of modern terminals and modern computers.
Which are things like color.
Right, links and links, both spellings are two different text, right? They can run on like a VT100 and they'll work, right? That's one of those old hardware terminals that just got a green screen, right? But Browse can run in, say, GNOME Terminal or Xterm or RxVT or the iTerm on your Mac, and all the modern terminal emulators that you're running on your real computer that's made in the 2000s.
Yeah, this won't run on like a VT100.
That has colors and sounds, and you have a mouse and all these sorts of assumptions and a scroll wheel. So it basically uses all those modern features of your browser to render a web page just like a real web page. The thing is, the resolution is just really low.
Well, the resolution, the pixels on anything that is not text, because it's all icons.
Yep.
It's all icons in a pixel grid. In a grid, not a pixel grid. The pixels in the images are each exactly the size of a tile that would have a character in it, like a letter.
Yep. So, but yeah, it's you can even watch video in it, look at images, click on links, read text. It's a full-on web browser.
What's really weirding me out,
like anyone who knows how to use a web browser could use this. It would just look really pixely.
What's really weirding me out is just looking at these images. They look so much like the resolution you got in old PC games like Police Quest.
Yep.
That is giving me a weird nostalgia for games like Police Quest.
It would be like if you ran. It feels almost like you ran actual Chrome, but on DOS, and the resolution of the screen was still 320 by whatever the fuck it was in old DOS.
Yep.
But your CPU was strong enough, and it actually just kind of worked. But you didn't have any advanced GPU, and your resolution was still 320 by whatever with 256 colors.
God, in the DOS era, I had a monitor that was 12 inches, and its max resolution was 800 by 600.
I think we had a 15-inch. We was full fancy.
No, I didn't have that. But then I had that giant 19-inch super CRT that I brought to RIT.
I brought it to RIT, a 17-inch.
Yep. That 19-inch, that was one of the only thing I've had to move in my life that was harder than moving that monitor was the fucker, that couch.
And then the people who took away that fucker just
Yep.
took it away. 1, 2, 3, whoop,
Yep.
bye-bye.
I was really saddened by that.
They had no problem moving it.
So yeah, in the meta moment, whatever, we're going to be at PAX West, the real PAX. We're doing a panel. It's not only going to be live at PAX on Monday, but it's going to be live streamed on the official PAX Twitch. So if you don't go to PAX,
I don't know which one of them. I think there might be 2 or 3 official
yep,
PAX Twitches.
it will be probably PAX 2 or PAX 3. As soon as we know, we will let you know.
And we'll probably tweet when it's starting, too.
Yep, I will probably schedule all those tweets well in
You
advance.
should follow Geek Nights on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all the different social places because we have accounts there.
Also, if you're listening to this podcast, you could actually watch us record it live on YouTube. There are currently 5 people watching us do this
I
on
would already
YouTube.
discourage you from listening to this podcast.
I'm just saying you
it's
could.
It's not worth your time to listen to this podcast. It's even less worth your time to watch the podcast being recorded live.
I'm just saying you could. I didn't say you should. And also, we just did another Judge Anime by its cover. That video is up, and it's on Scott's YouTube. And a lot of you only follow my YouTube. You should also follow Scott's YouTube, because some Geek Night stuff.
Some project of great evil, possibly on my YouTube soon.
Uh-oh. Is this one I know about, or is this a new evil?
I told it to you recently.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about. Anyway, if you do that evil, it'll be great. So, we're not going to try to analyze the Odyssey, I think. We're going to mention that.
There's nothing we can say.
Well, anything I could say would either be me basically poorly reiterating things I learned in high
I
school.
feel like if you read a book about physics and then tried to say things about physics, it's like,
But more importantly,
we're
like,
not qualified. We're consumers. We're not,
it depends on what the book is. Like, the ear, the eye, the arm, there aren't a lot of book clubs that talked about it. So we tried to analyze its themes and do like some serious lit crit. But I don't really want to bother with that with the Odyssey, because the Odyssey is one of the most studied stories in human history.
Mm-hmm.
You can read way smarter people than us. So I want to approach this talking about this translation and like how it worked for us. Mm-hmm. And more importantly, I also want to talk about the story at face value as we read it, like as though we just read this book and it had no history. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to try to read into it. You can go read the debate over whether or not Odysseus was justified in killing all the slaves.
Right. So, having not read completely other translations, I've read, small portions.
Yeah,
of
that's
other
why I'm really curious
translations.
from your impression. So what kind of person do you think Odysseus is what I really want to ask you.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is like, so on the one hand, you sort of feel like, well, this story is so old and not advanced, right? It doesn't have modern sensibilities. It has the most ancient sensibility possible.
Yep.
Almost the most ancient human sensibility possible. So you assume that it's sort of really straightforward and not complex, right? Odysseus is a straightforward hero, good guy dude, right? He goes to a war, but he can't get home because the gods are tormenting him, but he's a smart, good, awesome dude, which is why Athena likes him.
I love he's so smart and good that the opening to the book is basically just Athena being like, hey, Zeus, remember Odysseus? We should do something about him. And Zeus is even like, oh yeah, he's like the one smart one. All right.
His special skills are lying and fighting.
Yeah, that's pretty much all he lying, fighting, and then crying about the aftermath of fighting. Those
Right.
three things.
But he's a good person. He cares about his family, right?
Yep.
He cares about his crew people, right? Even though he's banging a hot goddess, he still wants his regular old
Yep.
wife.
And frankly, his crew people, not the sharpest tools in the shed.
And then, he gets home and, he takes care of things in a way that, to modern sensibility seems evil and cruel.
Well, wait, when he
but
gets
in
home,
ancient
what does he
times-
do? First he lies, and then he fights.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are his two things.
I guess he's okay at boating.
I guess what I enjoyed the most that didn't come out, because when I read this originally, I read the Odyssey in high school, end to end, was that I didn't really get him it said oh yeah, he's a good liar, but I didn't really think about I had to have that analysis sort of spoon fed to me, and it didn't really come out from the text that he was a good liar, other than the text telling me over and over again he's good at lying. Reading this, he is good at lying. He lies all the time.
He comes up with incredibly complex. People are like, "Oh, who are you?" And he comes up with this complete character.
I'm from Crete.
I'm from this town and this place, and I met this person.
Art
and
Vandelay.
Right, he's got a whole story just out of his ass with every minute detail of,
But also-
a person's life that's mostly believable.
So
Right?
I
He
noticed
even fools
something.
his own dad.
I noticed something I did. The only person he does not fool is his dog. I love how his dog is like,
Doesn't the dog just die?
the dog sees him and is like, well, you're back. I see you. Now I'm dead. I was only waiting to see you.
Yep. So
But-
the thing about his lying though, right, is that the structure of the book actually sort of the chronology of it was totally messed up. This is the thing that I noticed the most, right?
Yeah, and most people don't seem to notice this.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
normally you think of the story of the Odyssey, right? And it's well, what order do the things happen? This is the order the things happen, right? He's at the war. He
Yep.
runs away from the war.
Well, they win the war and he leaves.
Right, he leaves the war. Then all those adventure things happen with the Cyclops and the men. And
Yep.
right? Then he gets trapped on the island with the goddess.
Yep.
Then he escapes that island to get to the island with Nausica. And then from the island with Nausica, they actually help him get home.
And then when he's home, he deals with all his shit.
And then so that's the actual chronological order.
And all the shit at home, like Telemachus and all
Right.
that, is happening in parallel.
But what order, if you actually read this book, are these things told to you? In the book, he starts on the island with the goddess.
Yep.
And then he goes to the island with Nausica. And then he tells them the story of the things that happened between the war and being on the island with the goddess. They don't actually show you those things happening.
Yup.
That's Odysseus telling that king, Nausicaa's dad, about those things happening.
And the thing
And when he's telling him those things, is he lying?
I am so sure he's lying.
So, once I realized this, that
But he
all
also- but-
those things about the sirens, all the famous parts, the sirens, the
Yup.
whirlpool, that's only Odysseus telling a king those things happened, right? Are they actually true? Is the stuff that happened at the war even true? Well, first of all,
Well, at the same time,
stuff
though-
that happened at the war is corroborated by other people like Menelaus.
Yep.
Okay.
Because Telemachus, we see him actually going around and talking to people.
Right.
And they all agree on the history and the
Nestor
events.
and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
The second thing is that even though once I realized that, and I was like, oh, maybe all the fantasy famous adventure shit that's in one chapter of this book, by the way.
Yep.
All that's in one chapter where he tells the king that. Is that part a lie? Because every story Odysseus tells everyone else is a lie.
But some of the
But
things he knows.
Later on, even towards the end of the book, there's a part where Odysseus is thinking to himself, and he's like, oh man, this isn't as bad as he's like, am I gonna fight all these suitors? And he's like, well, I killed that fucking Cyclops, and it's like he wasn't lying about the Cyclops, because why would he? Unless he lied so much that he convinced himself.
I was about to
actually
make a
happened.
point. That is the only potential disruption to your read of that, is that people who are very good at lying and tell certain lies consistently tend to accidentally start to believe those lies and internalize
But
them.
there's also other truths. For example, everything that happened at the war was confirmed by other people who were also at the Trojan War.
Yep.
And he did leave on a boat with a bunch of dudes, and those dudes are gone. What the hell happened to them if his story is a lie? right? So I'm pretty confident that the story.
Well, all
he
the dudes who
tells
went with
Nausicaa's
him,
dad-
we know what happened to them.
Right,
According to him, they all
so
died.
I'm fairly confident that all the things that he said happened between the war and being on Calypso's island were mostly true.
Yeah.
But and then when he's because it's it's primitive writing from the ancient times when he's telling stories to other people and the story makes it obvious to the reader that he's lying because he usually starts those stories by saying he's someone other than Odysseus.
Yeah, but at the
Right.
same time,
When he tells the king he's Odysseus, he's not lying.
But he also, like, reading those passages where he tells the story, the thing I noticed, being a pretty good liar myself, I'm good at lying, is that he in the telling of the story, he does the things that someone who's good at lying would do when they're lying, like lampshading the fact that he lies. Half his stories are, so I lied to this other motherfucker, and I'm telling you about it. That is one of the best ways to convince someone you're lying to that you're not lying to them,
Oh, yeah.
is bring them into the trust of, yeah, so I lied to that other guy about this thing. And he also, he starts to include very specific details sometimes in the manner that someone who's lying might do that, about exactly how far away the rock was thrown by
But here's
Polyphemus.
the thing: is that other people, when they're telling stories and not lying, also include all those details. Because remember, these ancient times were before books, TV, cell phones, distractions, whatever. Right? So people mostly spent their time entertainment with storytelling. So people were good at telling stories and remembered lots and lots of details.
But
So I feel like if you showed up at, say, a king's house asking to spend the night, and they asked you about your life, they would expect you to have all those details because that's how everyone can tell stories like that.
true, but at the same time, it's sort of implied that being a really excellent liar is a core, fundamental aspect of great Greek men.
Well,
And one might notice that all the people telling these stories are great men and are probably, maybe they're all lying to each other
great
all
in
the
quotes,
time.
Great in quotes.
Yeah, I'm making quote marks. And Telemachus is too young to know how to lie effectively. So he's just earnest. And you could look at it that maybe other people are lying to him.
Right. So Telemachus, right? Telemachus basically glossed over and not paid attention to when people adapt or homage to the Odyssey.
Yeah.
Right? So the thing about Telemachus that's interesting is
Well, he's 20.
Yeah.
But the book, it treats him like he's 7. The book is like he is too young to know anything about anything. Like if he even walks outside, they're worried he's gonna die.
Well, I mean, you look at Odysseus. He's got they talk about the scar he's got, so people know it's him for sure.
Yep.
But the story of how he got it, it's like he was doing adventure-y shit from a young age. Telemachus, I think, was sheltered in this wealthy house. And even though he's 20, he wasn't doing adventure-y shit like Odysseus was.
Arguably, his first adventure is because Odysseus isn't there, and he goes out to try to deal with that.
Yeah, and and the thing is, he's not like Herp the Derp. It's like usually.
No, he learns.
Yeah, usually when you have that sort of character, like the weak young kid who never went on an adventure, is like they suck. But Telemachus actually doesn't suck. He's just inexperienced, and he shows that he's the son of Odysseus.
Yep. Well, look,
you're the son of Odysseus. You're not actually going to suck if you practice.
Look at his baby's first deceit of well, don't tell my mom I'm leaving.
Yeah, and
but then you compare that to Odysseus and his so here's what we're gonna do to trick the Cyclops.
Right, and even though he doesn't he can't physically do anything about the suitors. Right, he totally just smack talks them all the time.
Yeah,
he has no problem talking back to them, but he just can't actually.
That's something that
stop
didn't
them.
come out either. When I read the Odyssey originally,
he isn't just like, oh, poor suitors. No,
Like,
I'll do what you
I
want.
really-
He's like, you fucking assholes. Why don't you get the hell out of here?
But I
They're
really-
like, you can't make us. He's like, you're right, I can't, but you guys suck.
I really read Telemachus as this kind of wishy-washy, milquetoast piece of crap, kind of that he wasn't aggressive and that he was weak. But reading this translation really brought out how
He's just doing what he can.
Yeah, and I think it's partly just that the
He knows
dialogue is
he
much
knows
more
his
natural.
capabilities.
Yeah,
If he was a badass, he probably would have just murdered them all on day one, but he wasn't. So
Yeah. but he's
What's he
got
gonna
this
do?
kernel of it. He's got the kernel of violence and the kernel of lying, ready. So let's see.
what else is going on?
But the way Odysseus tells that story, because another way to look at this, like you said, is he lands on this island after the war alone, tells this elaborate story, and then the kings of all the people on this island give him enough treasure to basically account for everything he would have had if he'd gone to the war, and then he just goes home with all that. I do like, it is kind of sad as an aside, though, that island gets completely fucked over for helping him.
Yep.
Like, that is not really talked about much. Like, yeah, Zeus or Poseidon just punish them forever and they're gone.
Well, I mean, I think, Odysseus doesn't really care about...
anyone other than himself.
Right, he doesn't care about, like, side consequences.
Yep.
Or, it's like the whole Trojan War is like a huge, like, basically natural disaster, and he doesn't give a crap.
Yep. Of course, it's hard to say because
He doesn't care about his men who died. Even though he makes, at the very end, he makes peace with all those families, but like, he doesn't care that they're unhappy. He's
well,
like,
notice, so when they're leaving Circe's house, there's what's his name? Props to my man, whatever his name was.
I can't remember.
Who got drunk and just fucking fell to his death from the ceiling because he was dumb and drunk. And Odysseus was like, well, we gotta go. So they just left him laying there. And the only reason he goes back and buries the guy and does all that stuff is because he meets the guy's literal ghost and makes a promise to that ghost. And then he has to follow through on the promise or he'll get in trouble.
Yep.
I feel like if he
does
didn't...
what, and the other thing is that people, Odysseus is so smart and so powerful and so awesome. 90% of the time, Athena just says, Odysseus, do this, and he does that. And then Athena makes him strong. Athena puts a disguise on him. Athena, tells him exactly where to go and what to say and what to do.
It's a little bit of...
Are you really that awesome if Athena is just some goddess is just, helping you out and giving you specific...
No, because if you look at the story, Athena didn't help him with Polyphemus.
No, there are definitely things Athena didn't help.
Athena didn't help him with Circe.
With.
He dealt with Circe on his own mostly. Hermes gave him some advice there.
Yeah, but it's like there's a lot of god interference going on, right? It's like,
but there is a lot of non-god interference. But I do like I read Athena very differently too in this translation. She's very like, oh my goddess, belle dandy, magical girl. Like there's a lot more stuff going on with her that comes out in this text because she's actually kind of chill and a little bit snarky and a little bit like, yeah, I'm going to help you out. Like, do this. Let's go. And she's also really good at lying.
Well, she's also like sort of eager to do certain things.
Yeah.
And Zeus is sort of like whatever, right? So there's a lot of times where
she's like, I really want to help this Odysseus guy. She's like,
she's like, Zeus, I want to do this. It'd be so fucking awesome. And Zeus is like, all right. And then she's like, yes. She goes down and she's like, yeah, let's fuck up these humans. Yeah.
Yep.
And she's on Odysseus' side, so other people get fucked.
As opposed to Poseidon, you get the impression that he's just looking around like someone in Philadelphia, just waiting for anyone to cross him, and then he just comes down on them.
He's like, who's burning lots of things in sacrifice to me? Those people good? Those people good? I don't see a lot of smoke coming from over there.
Yep.
Who's that smoke for? Not for me. Is any water near these people? Let me see. They got any boats? Let me see here. Any boats moving?
Yep. And it also reminds
you
you
that boat move, I'll be back.
How powerful Poseidon is, that even Zeus is like, yeah, Odysseus really got the short end of the stick, but I can't really do anything about what Poseidon wants. Like, even Zeus can't really tell Poseidon what to do.
So I like how Zeus is like, he's the god of strangers, right?
Yeah.
They talk about that. And like most of the book, like there's one more, I mean, there's a lot of morals, but the number one moral of the book seems to be, if someone comes to visit you properly, you gotta be just nice to them and don't treat them like shit. And if you visit someone, you can totally expect them to feed you and give you treasure. And it's sort of like, hey, everyone, if people are traveling around, even if you don't know who the hell they are, you should be nice to them and treat them nicely. And that's a lesson I think that is good for the modern world.
Yep. But also based on the context of the foreword and a bunch of reading I did about the old Greece, is that there seemed to be this idea that people who shared food and did this stranger thing, they would then basically be allies and not make war against each other or cause trouble for each other. And that was a way to sort of prevent into like local warfare, so that to the rest of the world, the Greeks are these roving, like murderous barbarians that just come to your shores and fucking kill everything and eat everything.
I mean, I guess in newer times than this, right? Lots of nomadic peoples have the same kind of thing, hospitality, right? Where it's like, you come into my tent, kind of thing.
Yep. Well, we've shared water. Now we can't ever go to war.
Yep.
But we did neither one. There's people.
Let us be friends.
But we know there's people on that other island. Did you ever have water with them? No. Let's just go steal all their shit.
It's like, yeah, they were jerks when he visited them. And it's sort of like, well, nice people who treat foreigners nicely are treated nicely. But even the people who treat each other nicely, if you're a shithead, won't treat you nicely. It's sort of like it's okay to kill jerks.
Yep. Because I noticed when he's telling the story of all the different places they land, like all these short vignettes, they land on the one island and everybody tries to eat them. And they land on Polyphemus Island, and he just eats them. And then he goes by Scylla and Charybdis, and Scylla just eats 6 of them. A lot of people get eaten.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good, this is also a good lesson for the modern world, right?
Don't get eaten.
Be nice to everyone except jerks. Jerks you can treat like
Yep.
shit because they're jerks.
I do enjoy, you talked about like
You don't have to tolerate intolerance.
how the gods do a lot, but if you notice, as most situations where a god or goddess helps Odysseus, they're only helping them with the part that he can't do anything about. Because there's one point where Hermes is like, and I think Athena says a similar thing to him at one point. Circe definitely says this. You're a human. You can't do shit about what the gods want. If a god tells you to do something, you do it.
That's right.
Ghostbusters taught us that lesson.
But
The next time someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes.
Odysseus is in the lucky position where the gods happen to want him to do good.
But he's in the unlucky position where
he's
in the unlucky position where the gods are interested in him. It's this double-edged sword. If the gods notice you, it's generally more bad than good, even if they want to help you. But because the gods noticed him and are fucking with him, at least he has other gods who like him enough to help him.
Well, if you want to know about gods noticing you, you should watch Clash of the Titans.
Yeah. Or possibly read the Prince of Nothing series, depending on how that goes in the end. Because that is definitely do not let the gods notice you.
What do you see? Well, Lord of the Rings, you don't want the Eye of Sauron upon you.
You do not want it to see you. But, there's another thing I was thinking of along the lines of Polyphemus and all these people eating people. Right, so the gods, like they make all these points about how you can't do anything about the gods. You can only do things about people. And the gods really only help Odysseus with the god stuff, and he really just deals with the people stuff on his own, and he's pretty good at it. But at the same time, with the people stuff, he very often makes mistakes, like he doesn't tell his crew the full truth, and then as a result, they do something stupid, and then he gets fucked over by it. That happens repeatedly.
With the cow eating situation?
Yeah, he's just like, yeah, don't do this thing, but he doesn't really tell him why. Or like, don't open this bag, but doesn't really tell him why. And then they do something stupid, and that ruins him. But should he have... I feel like he could have lied to his guys, or he could have told them the truth, and they both would have worked. But instead, he just omits the truth. It seems like omitting is worse than both lying and not lying. And that seems to come up multiple times.
Yeah, I mean, it's like... I know, he was sort of following the instructions he was given, right? He was like, don't eat the... Right, but he can't make anyone else follow the instructions, right? If I see... A lot of times where he sees Athena and no one else sees her, right? Stuff like that. And it's like, if I saw a god and it told me stuff, and then what am I going to tell you? Hey, Ram, I saw Athena and she said do this. You put me in the crazy house.
But at the same time, at one point, Telemachus is like, Athena told me to do this, and everyone's like, oh, then you should do it. If Athena tells you to do something, just do it. Like, everyone agrees the gods are literally real and come down and say hi.
Where it's like, oh, Zeus, send me aside. It's like thunder. It's like,
Yep.
all right. Immediate thunder.
But there's one thing in Emily Wilson's translation that I noticed specifically. I remember when the siren bit, which is so short, it's like such in passing.
It is weird that that's like the number one most adapted, thing in other tales. Yet it's like a page. It's less than a page.
But
I wonder how, that became like that portion of the story became the as the story was adapted over the years, how that part was magnified and the other
I
parts
feel
were
like
magnified.
sexy bird ladies
just
sells.
because it's fun.
Yeah. Actually, the foreword talks a little bit about that. Especially because it points out that the thing the sirens seduce Odysseus with is not any of the things you think.
I love that a lot.
They literally try to seduce him with, we'll tell you about what happened in the war that you fought because you clearly have PTSD.
Yep. Imagine, Rim, if there was you're going past some sirens, right? And it's people tend to think, with the sirens, they were just singing such sweet music. It was so wonderful to hear. You wanted to go over and listen to it forever because it was all mystifying. It's no, the sirens were like, hey, Odysseus, we know everything. He's like, all right. So he's like, Rim, I know everything. I'll tell you what dark matter is.
Oh, no. I'd swim over there.
It's I'll tell I'll let you play this video game, and I'll let you play Quest for Glory again. It's
but when Cersei warns him about the sirens, she basically says,
I'll tell you what happens in Half-Life 3.
She says, plug your ears. If you want to hear it, if you're curious, get your men to tie you up. If. But when Odysseus tells his men about the sirens, he says, she told me I have to listen. I thought that was really, really funny. That divide between those two lines.
I mean,
that stood out in my head because I got to the sirens.
If you're a smart person, at least you're a curious person, right?
Yeah.
So Odysseus, we're told, is a smart person, smarter than the other people, and there's some evidence of that.
Yeah.
So he's curious as hell. He wants to know what the fucking sirens.
And also, it's smart because if he was like, "Yeah, guys, I really want to listen to this shit because apparently it's awesome, but none of you can," you know what would have happened? One of his idiot people would have pulled the earplugs out,
and he can't tie everyone to the mast because.
And he knew
who's gonna row the boat.
And he learned his lesson because of all the other times his crew fucked up.
Yep.
So it was both smart that he did that and really funny that that's how he did it. That stood out to me really strongly, even though I read that part a long time ago because we announced this book club in March.
Okay.
So, I mean, I really, really like this translation, and I really like the story.
The main thing that that I like about it is that it's just way easy to read because usually when you have translations of things, they're all written in a way that makes them difficult to read, or you have to read them slowly and carefully.
Not just easy to read, but more I intrinsically got the parts that were funny or the parts that were supposed to be scary.
Yeah, I can both breeze through it and not have to read slowly and carefully, and also gain a complete understanding of what's happening. A lot of the ones are written in sort of fake oldie English. They're written the way that Shakespeare actually wrote, but fakely, right?
Yep.
They put in these.
Mr. Thou.
Yeah, thous and these and whatever to sound old, even though the Shakespeare was thousands of years after Homer.
Yeah.
So it's the difference between current English, the English that we speak on this podcast, and the English of Shakespeare is a speck compared to the difference between Shakespeare's English and Greek of Homer. So what's the point if you're even if you use fancy old words that they're not they're not really as old as Greek. So what's the point, right?
But it's the difference between a line.
You might as well make it so someone can fucking read it.
Like reading a paragraph or a stanza or whatever, and then there's the note that's like, Telemachus is being snarky here, versus just reading and being like, Telemachus. Yeah.
Yep.
Get him.
Yep.
And the ghosts were not scary at all in high school. When I read that bit with the ghosts, it was just so what? These people just walk over and talk to him? This part, it actually was creepy.
Yeah, it's
it felt creepy.
In order to proceed, he had to go into hell and back.
Yep.
And it's oh shit, where's he going?
I like that bit a lot because he's scared, but then he starts to do it, and then he's really into
Doesn't
it.
He see his I forget all the details, but he sees
his
grandma.
mom.
Oh, his mom.
He
It's
sees
not his
all these
grandma.
dead people. He sees Captain what's his name who fell to his death.
Yep.
Right, that guy's just oh yeah, I
forget
fucked
if he
up.
sees Agamemnon, but Agamemnon's there later to see the suitors.
Oh yeah,
that was funny.
That was-
Agamemnon at the almost at the very end of the book, all the suitors are dead, and Agamemnon and Achilles are there, and isn't someone else there? I forget. But basically, those are the two important ones that are there, and they're oh, all the awesome dudes from Ithaca. Why the hell are you dead? And they're we were trying to get with Odysseus' wife because he disappeared. And they're like, well, they knew Odysseus in life, right?
Yeah, I like half the ghosts are like, motherfucking Odysseus! Oh my god! Yeah, we're dead.
And then they're like, because they didn't think the suitors were bad because they weren't paying attention to what was happening in the real world, right?
Yep.
And then they're like, but then Odysseus actually came back and his wife didn't, was actually loyal to him and wouldn't get with any of us. And Agamemnon's like, man, what an awesome wife.
Yep.
Not like my bitch wife who killed me.
Yep, because Agamemnon is really, his advice to Odysseus is pretty shitty and sexist, because he's like, yeah, don't tell your wife too much, because she might do something to you, you know? But then at the same time, he's like, but Penelope is pretty smart. Yeah. My favorite bit of the ghost, and we talked about this before the show, was that Heracles comes out and he's just like, all the other ghosts are like sad and mournful and wistful and like they're very weird and like, yeah, we're dead and there's no substance to us anymore and it sucks down here. And then Hercules just comes out with a bow and arrow, like he sees Odysseus and all the other ghosts are afraid of his sword, and he's just like, I'll fight you. Like he comes right out just being badass, like, yeah, all these other people are dead, but I'm a badass. I'm Heracles. What do you want? Let's go. What up?
Yeah. It's also cool that even in whatever BC, 1000-something BC, sex and violence are still really awesome. And people today still really like sex and violence. So not much has changed, humans.
Yeah, but the story does, like, many parts of it feel very natural to a modern sensibility if you just translate it with natural modern language. Like the lying and all the things Odysseus does. Like, a lot of it fits very well with the way we talk, act, and think today. Humans back then weren't that different from humans today.
And you can see most basic adventure stories you read today really aren't, have a lot in common with this, right? It's like, oh, I'm in a tight spot. I go on a little journey. I get into another tight spot. I go on a little journey. I have a goal in mind, a place I want to get to at the end. The big bad guys, they get there. They get their comeuppance. Everyone's happy at the end.
Yep. And this is in the foreword, so I don't really want to go deep into it because you can read the foreword if you didn't. But I really like how specifically this calls out the slaves everywhere, because that's just that proto-Greek society, like the Mycenae, all the civilizations that disappeared around the Sea People time, probably built almost entirely on slavery.
Yeah, I mean, most people, they think if I say to you ancient Greece, most people in their mind immediately have a picture of like, Athens with white pillars and marble buildings everywhere.
One, those pillars were painted in the most gaudy paint you can imagine.
Well, also, Parthenons, right? And then lots of dudes in togas walking around, right? It's like, that's what you think immediately. But it's like, no, it was way ancient human times before even feudalism. And
Sparta invaded its neighbors and enslaved them similarly to how the United States enslaved Africans.
Right, you had a rich dude, and then
like chattel slavery, not all those other forms of slavery from like later Greek or Roman times.
You had rich people who mattered in society, at least, and then a whole bunch of slaves and servants and other servile peoples below them.
And even like Circe has nymphs as slaves. Like they're just slaves everywhere. And you see all these times Odysseus has so few people with him that even on the trip, he's always like, so I'll send you 3 and take a slave. Like he'd send slaves along because he didn't have that many people to do stuff for him. But they're never mentioned in it. Like until he assigns a slave to like one of his scouting parties, at no point is anyone with him described. Like until it matters, and like, oh yeah, and some slaves. Like you wouldn't have even known he had slaves with him.
At the end, though, they do make they make like this special note, right? It's like, okay, well, there's the swineherd who's like the best slave, and he's a good person who lets people in his home and treats them well.
Still a slave.
He's still a slave, but because he's good, Odysseus treats him good. There's the cowherd also, who's good.
Yep.
Right? Again, stayed loyal to Odysseus, so he was treated well. And then there's the goat herd, who is probably the worst motherfucker. The goat herd is worse than the fucking suitors. He's just an evil asshole who betrayed Odysseus and tried to help the suitors, even though he was Odysseus' slave. And it's like all the other, like the suitors, they just get speared in the head or whatever. The goat herd, man, he gets like chopped up into pieces. They like chop his nuts off, I think. It's like he gets it bad, and they sort of, it's like he deserves it bad because. I guess he did a worse thing than what the suitors are doing.
Yep. But those are the bits that are very different compared to a modern sensibility of a story. All the stuff around the slaves, all the stuff around the retribution against like the women after the suitors were killed, all that stuff definitely reeks of this very old and messed up age.
I like how he tells the grandma, the nanny slave grandma, he's like, I don't need you to tell me, which women are good and which ones aren't good. I'll figure that out myself. And then when it actually comes time, he's like, hey, Granny, which of the ladies should which ones are going to get hung outside and which ones are stayed loyal?
Well, I guess it definitely comes out very clearly that Odysseus's primary attribute might not even necessarily be that he's good at lying or good at lying and fighting, but it's that he spends almost all his effort controlling what other people think about him and making sure that the story people tell about him is exactly the one he wants them to tell. I mean, he gets a bunch of his men killed leaving Polyphemus's cave. Because as soon as he's out of range, as soon as he's on the boat, he turns around and is like, yo, guess what? My name's Odysseus, fucker. Mm-hmm. He risks everyone's lives just to make sure someone will remember his story.
Well, also, even when he's lying and saying he's not Odysseus, he includes Odysseus in his story. He's like, yeah, I met this. He's like, yeah, my name is so-and-so. And what's my story? I was traveling around and I met this totally awesome dude named Odysseus. And he was doing this, and then we parted ways, and then I ended up here.
Though?
And now, that person who believes that lie may know of Odysseus because he's so famous, but also now believes awesomeness about Odysseus.
I would actually believe a specific part he lied a lot in is the part where he's recounting all the dead people he met. Let's assume that he did go to Hades, and some of that is true, which does make sense.
Yeah, I guess there's that he could be lying about going to Hades.
But I think he learned of what happened to Agamemnon there in a way that he might not have been able to. Otherwise, it's possible to argue that he learned things from them that he couldn't have learned otherwise. But I would read that even if he literally did the Hades thing and literally met some of those people, that he lied about most of them. Because it goes from my mom, specific people who learned something important, and then it's just he name drops fucking everyone in all of Greek history. It's like, oh yeah, and Hercules was there, and Agamemnon was there.
The thing is, it's on the one, usually what happens in a lot of stories, a common trope, is there'll be fantastical elements.
Yep.
Right? And those fantastical elements, it's that was actually, none of that literally happened. That was just shown to, you thought it was literally happening, but actually it was in a dream or an imagination.
Well, you want a good modern example of that? Kill Bill. The crazy 88 at the end of Kill Bill. There's this crazy fight scene. It's the climax of the movie. The second movie, when the crazy 88 comes up and someone tells the story, they make it very clear, yeah, there weren't actually 88 of them.
Well, there weren't 88 of them in the movie, the first
movie.
But,
there was a crazy fight and the crazy 88, but that line of there weren't 88 of them and the way it's
they just thought it was cool to call them. But anyway.
But the way that is
more Utena, where there's an explanation for the supernatural parts that they're not real.
Yeah.
Right? Even though you think the whole time you're reading the story, supernatural parts are real, and then they're not actually real, right? They were just made you believe they were real. But actually, no. In the Odyssey, the supernatural parts are within the world of the Odyssey real. Freaking Zeus is making thunder.
Yep.
Right? It's so there's no reason to question the Hades part or the Circe turning people into pigs part or the goddess on the island of Calypso.
But I would potentially question that
Odysseus... based on their supernatural nature.
Oh, yeah. But based on the shorter, the giant name dropping that happens after the important ones really feels like he's just throwing in a bunch of more stuff to keep because he's basically got all the important people on this island listening to his story.
But what I'm saying is that you could easily modify the Odyssey so slightly to where you could be most of the supernatural stuff happens on the one chapter of adventure after the war. Right?
Yep.
That's most of the supernatural stuff is there. You could retell the Odyssey in such a way to where nothing supernatural at all happens outside of that one part. And yes, Odysseus actually is lying about all the supernatural things.
Yep.
That would be kind of a cool, way to think about it. That's not what happens in this.
Nope.
In
fact, you could go one step further.
Odyssey,
I think you could even tell the story, and I never considered this possibility until I read this translation. You could even tell the story of he might not have even made it to the fucking Trojan War. He might have gone to this war, bailed, had trouble, ended up on this island and then just tells this giant story, gets these people to give him a bunch of loot, and then goes home and fucks up the suitors.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could think that you could argue that the entire middle was a lie.
Mm.
But I really enjoyed it, and I want to read pretty much anything that Emily Wilson translates at this point.
What is she going to translate? So there's the Iliad, which comes before the Odyssey, which is the actual story of the Trojan War.
There's
right?
There's a lot.
Achilles and Agamemnon and everybody.
There's supposedly some sequel that tell us something that it's the sequel to the Odyssey that was written way later than the Odyssey, but way ancient still. Like it's still really a really old story, but supposedly it's lost.
It is cool that like even in this ancient times, 1,000 years before actual Greece, there was like like sequels. Right? It's like it's like they keep bringing up Achilles and all this stuff, and it's like that was from a different book. It's like they're expecting you, and when you're reading the Odyssey, it's sort of assumed what happened in the Iliad, right? It's like, oh, there's Agamemnon and there's Menelaus and Helen and everything, and it's like, you're supposed to know.
Yep, it doesn't tell you who Achilles is. It assumes you know.
Yep.
I mean, it was just like, I saw Achilles, and everyone's like, yeah, Achilles. Oh man, fist bump.
It's like you're supposed to know.
I just can't get over Heracles coming out of Hades, just like armed and ready to fight, and just like, I was in hell, no big deal. All right, so I guess we're done here.
Okay.
What's have you thought about what the next book will be? Because I
got some ideas.
All right, I won't hold you to it now.